One of the most toolsy prospects in this year's draft at the edge rusher position, but modest production over this past season with an 11% pass rush win rate and a 7.6% run stop rate, Mykel Williams. Let's dive right into it. So today we're going to be talking about the Georgia Bulldog, Mykel Williams, doing a similar breakdown style to our last video, similar time frame, hopefully, in this video, which means I got to fly through some of these grades, go a little bit quicker, but ultimately the full breakdown maybe on doseofdn.com at some point in terms of the report that I have here. But I've watched a ton of this player, and he's super intriguing heading into this draft because of the injury that he dealt with against Clemson, stating that he was playing at 60% the entire season in terms of health, but he did play a lot this past season in terms of the amount of games that he's played in terms of snap counts, maybe not at the highest level, but he is truly versatile, plays up and down the line of scrimmage, measures in incredibly well at 6'5", 260 pounds, over 34-inch arms, and he's only 20 years old with pretty consistent production year after year. It's not mind-blowing. The percentage rates will also showcase that, but I thought that he looked like a better player this past season than what he showed in 2023, even if he was playing through an injury, as he mentions, and I think that means a lot because he just looked like a more athletic piece this past season. I think he's built to be more of a true 4-3 base end. Does bring the flexibility for really whatever scheme you're playing in. He could line as a 3-4 defensive end. He's played as a stand-up edge rusher as well, and he at least has some of the coverage capabilities that you could put him in a certain spots like that. I wouldn't do it very often due to some of the movement skills, but there is some awareness that pops up, and his length is the biggest aspect when you see him back in coverage. But let's start here first with the first step explosion. I think this is slightly above average. It's close to a truly above average grade for me here. It's in a little bit of a weird spot because I don't think his first step is always as reactive or anticipation heavy where he feels like he's taking off the ball. And I also think some of that ties into the plan as well. Even when he gets a great jump, it doesn't feel like it all strings together incredibly well. But I love the depth that he covers vertically. He can put a lot of pressure on an offensive tackle quickly. You'll especially see this within his second stride, how effective that can be. Even the lateral depth that he can cover, whether this is the ability to work with wide zone schemes or slide protection or just being utilized as a stunt rusher. He was a looper oftentimes. He's very effective. He's very fluid in terms of the agility, working laterally down the line of scrimmage and also being able to stay square to the line of scrimmage, which of course helps as a run defender as well. I think he does a lot of things well in terms of his first step. There is some twitch within his get off, but it's the depth that he does cover. It's the lateral ability, and it's the ability to be very aggressive upfield. And I think where this carries over, you see some of his closing ability in space specifically. That's where you'll see his length. You'll see the range because of that. And you also see the motor that he plays with, which is a very good motor at this point. I don't think some of the closing burst is truly outstanding, which I think also points back to some of that first step. But for me right now, it's slightly above average. Guys with length that get their arms up in pass lanes, but he truly impacts passes. He truly gets his hands on the football. And you also see this as a pass rusher, his ability to cause fumbles specifically as well. And when he carries that with some of the agility and some of the slither that he also brings to the table, then of course the depth that he can cover to step over blocks, I think that his first step is slightly above average to an above average grade. Now in terms of the play strength, this is where it's going to translate for a lot of teams and what they'll probably love about this prospect. I have this at a very good spot, and I still think he can continue to fill out his frame. I think he's capable of doing that, but right now he's got the core strength, the hip power to drive through contact. You'll see some of the leg drive that even when he doesn't do a great job of keeping himself a little bit wide, that way the leg drive and bull rush can be continuous and sustained throughout a rep where he gets a little bit upright, a little bit linear. You'll still feel some of that leg drive. He keeps really tight hands on his punches, which leads to really nice upper body force on that initial entry. Just overall, I think he plays with very good play strength in really every category that you see him in as a run defender or as a pass rusher. The way that he shifts his weight, especially if he's dealing with an ankle injury, to have to be able to kind of lean on one side over the other. That ability to shift weight through contact, settle himself down, I think that showed up a lot better this past season in terms of the activeness to get his footwork underneath him to help himself out. He doesn't really get moved off a spot very often. Combo blocks with tight ends didn't feel like it had a major impact on him whatsoever. He's pretty leveraged in those spots. Now, I did think there was flashes of him not getting his feet into a proper position to help himself out, and that's when you see him get kind of tripped up. You'd see this on wider zone schemes where you just wouldn't see him be able to maintain balance. Natural play strength that he brings to the table, I think it's very good at this time. He could fill out the frame a little bit more, but he resets his base. He plays with a wide base. He has some of the knee bend, shows some of the leg drive. It's just about really dialing in some of the technical aspects, not playing upright, staying wide so he can continue that leg drive. That can be improved, but overall, very good play strength. And then you go on to the pass rush aspect, and even though the production isn't fantastic, I ended up still giving him a good grade here. And this isn't like not warranted or not deserved for me. The reason I end up with a good grade is simply because I think that he is going to have a way that if he reaches his peak that he can beat pretty much everybody that lines up across. I think that Diaz is going to have the capability to have a plan for anybody that lines up against: offensive tackle, guards, centers. He can align in different spots, and I think he has a way to win against really everybody. And what I noticed is I thought the games that he actually got more snaps, like you think about Texas in the playoffs, where he was on the field much more and he was able to constantly get reps, he actually started to show off towards the end of that game. Early, it felt a little bit shaky. It felt like he wasn't as impactful, but as the game rolled along, you felt the relentlessness, you felt the success really start to kind of come along, and then you also start to see some of the craftiness. And I think he has very underrated football intelligence as a pass rusher, also just as a player in general, but to find ways to kind of adapt to on offensive tackle is setting against him, find ways to try to work off that specifically as the game rolls along. And I thought that he showed that, hey, the more snaps I get, the more impactful I could actually be. It helped me ultimately push this to a good grade for him. A few different moves that he can get to. You see kind of the in and out swipe that he can get to. I think that he brings some underrated slither as a pass rusher, which ties back to the agility I think is good as well. And this is kind of working in some of those tight spaces. You'll see this in the way that he can set up offensive tackles, maybe in shorter sets, how he can try to get the edge. You'll also see the ability to flip his hips really quickly through contact, play half-man opportunities, or just split gaps when he's trying to work between a tackle and a guard. You'll see some of that slither really pop out. Now, overall, there's still a lot of development that feels like it's going to be needed here. I don't always feel like there's a true staple go-to move that I was like, hey, if he does this, this will translate immediately. That's the biggest problem as a pass rusher. There's variety to it. I think there's upside to be very deep as a pass rush arsenal, but I don't know what's the go-to. He's going to constantly have success. Maybe you could say speed to power, but even there, I don't feel like it's super consistent in terms of the entry, in terms of always being super leveraged at the point of attack, even just kind of missed timing some of those pass rush plans, where I don't know that I feel like there's a perfect move that's like he gets to this and he's going to win and that's going to translate immediately. I also tend to believe he can telegraph a little bit some of those in and out moves or side steps as a rusher, which can also limit some of the effectiveness. I don't know that that's there, and that may take a little bit of time because I think overall he has to work on timing with his hands and his footwork and kind of dialing that in a little bit more. Does show some shake at the top of rush, and honestly, this worked against guards at times, which leads to a lot of upside. That short area quickness is real. This ties with his hand. I think he plays with fast hands. Of course, he's got a lot of power at the point of attack, but I think he's very reactive with his hand usage as well, and he has an ability to stay ready so his hands can stay low. Little club moves underneath to kind of keep himself free. He's very active to work from tackle to guard. Say use him on a stunt or works off one man to the next, and he's very quick to be reactive to, let me have my hands ready, let me fight off this block, let me not get latched cleanly, let me stay in the race as an edge rusher. And he's very capable. You all see this in terms of the awareness when he squeezed back inside. You'll see some of the ability to create lean and be able to get himself skinny, which is super impressive for a guy at his build with that kind of power, to get himself skinny, work through kind of smaller pass rush angles, specifically the contact balance. I think this is going to translate well because it allows him to kind of continue to work upfield, specifically do a better job of opening up pathways as a pass rusher, setting himself up a little bit earlier with better angles where he doesn't get so tight to an offensive lineman that he limits the actual pass rush moves that he can get to. I didn't always feel like he was anticipating strikes from offensive linemen, anticipating what their go-to move was going to be so that he could play off of that. He felt more reactive in the sense of, all right, he's setting like this, let me try to work off it now. It wasn't as instinctual feel as, okay, here comes the strike, let me work off of that. I didn't feel that as much. I felt a readiness to his game, but I didn't feel much as the instincts to really take advantage of how an offensive lineman was playing him in the moment. Also, he plays a little bit too upright at times. I think you'll especially see this in kind of the crossover moves that he gets to. It limits some of the shake. He definitely could cover a lot of depth and really cross face, but he can be a little bit upright. However, with the power that he carries, especially in the lower body, through the upper body, through the force, through the ground, you'll see some of the dip move that he can settle into with some of the ability to get skinny. You'll see his ability to kind of just uplift guys through the shoulders, specifically when he gets underneath strikes or gets underneath your pads. Footwork covers enough depth where there's variety. You know, his skip step covers a lot of ground. It's very threatening when he gets to it. There's a twitch within his footwork as well. And to me, the control that he carries is everything here. The ability to change directions, the ability to laterally move and kind of mirror blocks as a run defender will also pop up as well. Would like to see a little bit more, I think, closing burst and twitch when he gets the edge, when he tries to work around the corner. Again, playing a little bit lower in those spots to help himself as the rep goes along. But ultimately, I think he's a good pass rusher now that may have question marks about how fast it's going to translate. This could be one of those things where it takes a real minute for it to get there because I don't think there's a true go-to move that's going to be consistently successful early. But I think ultimately, if he gets to what he's capable of, he's going to have an ability to beat almost everybody that he lines up against in some way, and then also have the flexibility to truly win from everywhere. Now, in terms of the ability to shed blocks, it's one of those weirder spots for me. I still gave him a good grade here in terms of the ability to shed as a whole. There's a lot of things that I still like. Fights, he just battles, all right? He's always trying to work towards the football. The slither, some of the lower body flexion, I pointed out some of the ankle flexion that also points out as a pass rusher as well. There's some real knocks here too, where I think he could avoid contact a little bit more often. Sometimes I feel like he's searching for it. He's cool with entering contact, but other times I feel like he could play a little more slippery instead of having to enter contact all the time. Improve your footwork for consistency to really help yourself up there. Positioning for the run scheme could be a little bit hit and miss. Again, I think his football intelligence is better than what's expected for his ability to be reactive to the movement and to the run scheme, but I still think he could position himself better. Say there's a gap scheme, here comes the puller. How does he actually position himself to take on or to be able to work around the block or just position himself early? That could improve as well in terms of also resetting his base as the rep kind of goes along. But this is where the leverage shows up. This is where the core strength shows up to kind of fight off blocks, shows powerful punches at the point of attack as well. Just would like to see more consistency and actually truly creating space on that initial punch, right? You'll see the jolt there, but I don't always think he creates the kind of space that he's capable of creating as well, and he could speed up that process. So I think he's got good shed ability that could use some work. Then hand usage, actually, it's my lowest grade in any trait for this player. I went slightly above average here, kind of the same grade as I gave him with his first step explosion, to be honest, because I think he's very reactive. I think he has a variety of moves. I think the long arm has a lot of upside because it's so locked inside. He's so long as a pass rusher, and I think the times that he uses it actually makes some sense. And even when it doesn't feel like it strikes cleanly, it still creates an impact on offensive linemen. However, I feel like there's a lot of occasions where he feels like he's kind of just slapping around. There's not much timing to what he's getting to. He's just kind of slapping his hands around, which can be a little bit useless as a pass rusher at times. He's powerful to disengage. This can also show up in shed as well, but I think also there is a little bit of less of a proactiveness in terms of the hand usage, right? To kind of get ahead of it. It's much more reactive, I feel like, right now, which also makes his initial pass rush plan a little bit misplaced at times. The most inconsistent aspect is as a run defender, he can be a little bit high. He can kind of get up on the chin when he's trying to set the edge. This isn't always the case, and he'll reset a little bit, but for the most part, he can kind of run reps way too high, get up on the chin. Obviously, that's a flag, but it also just loses leverage for him as the rep goes along as a run defender, which just makes it inconsistent to get that clean stack and shed. He's very capable of working over blocks, has the footwork, has the strength to do it. He just plays a little bit too high there too oftentimes. Suddenness within his club moves. He's very reactive with his hands. I would just like to see his hands be a little bit faster, especially when working inside. I think he connects it well when you're working some of those stunt occasions. He's ready for split zone blocks. You'll see the eyes really show up there. There's a discipline to his game on the backside. You'll see this in the backside scrape. You'll see the discipline to his game. He'll take on split zone blockers with no problem whatsoever. Segmented as it feels at times. You want things to kind of flow together and be fluid, but I think the step for doing that for him is going to be making sure that the first move that he gets to, it's like full attention, that it's processed well, rather than immediately trying to get to the second thing. What am I going to string off of this? Because he strings things together, but I don't feel like he completely capitalizes on the first attempt as a pass rusher, which makes the second attempt not as effective either. Like, we got to string these together, but we got to be more consistent with the first move, have a more deliberate and decisive plan, which I think would help him out more as well. I don't feel like it's always that decisive as a pass rusher. He needs a more decisive place pass rush initial move better together with his second move to have more consistency, rather than right now it feels like if it's not there, he just kind of works to the second thing, but that's because he didn't put the full attention into that first pass rush plan. So there's no doubt work that needs to be had here. I think last year was actually a step forward for him in terms of just movement skills alone, even dealing with the injury. And while I think that this is a player that has a relatively high ceiling because I can pretty much align him anywhere, and I think he's going to be an impactful run defender, there are definitely concerns because there's a lot of things that don't feel like, oh, put it to the bank, he's great in this category. There's a lot of good, not a lot of great right now. And that's where I'm at with a weird spot. It's actually in some ways for me like Jahad Campbell. It's a lot of things I think are good. There's not a lot that I think is great outside of just true play strength. But ultimately, I think for his positional group and the fact that I think he's going to have the variety to win a lot of different ways, it could be a little bit safer than, say, like a Shamar Stewart, who's also a Toolsy prospect. And I love the toughness of this player. I don't have really low grades anywhere. I think he's got a good motor, very good discipline. I think he's a very smart player. And he's such a young player. I think Mykel Williams is going to be and have a chance to be a very impactful professional. Maybe not the highest ceiling. Okay, I end up giving like a 6.55 ceiling, but I also don't think the floor is super low either. It's just how much can we get as a pass rusher? I got him as a 6.3 there. So overall, final grade was a 6.4 for Mykel Williams. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Thank you, Prop, for watching, and I'm out.